recorded, so I will record this right now. And all I'm going to say is let's try and do this for real, where once we start the 20-minute counter, I'll play interviewer, you play interviewee. There's no other people to talk to.
Sounds good.
Cool.
And everyone can see my screen with the leak code problem, correct?
Yes.
Right.
And I'll keep you to time. So starting now, let's do it. Okay.
Right.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see
Hey,
you.
same.
Okay, so we're going to be doing this lead code problem today for the interview. So first things first, I just want you to read through the description. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. So I've got this merge sorted arrays problem. And I'm just going to read through it, and I tend to I'll make comments as I go. So we've got two integer arrays, nums1 and nums2, and they're sorted in non-decreasing order, which sounds to me like that means increasing order. And
There's a difference.
there is a difference.
Yes. Non-decreasing means that increasing strictly means that you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Non-decreasing means you can go 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4. So you could see the same number multiple times, and as long as that number has not increased, it's still okay. So non-decreasing means we simply don't go down, but we also don't have to go up every
Interesting.
element. Yeah.
I'm looking at the inputs here. Examples 2 and 3, unfortunately, the input sizes are sort of trivial because it's an element of 1. But for example, 1, it indeed is non-decreasing, though I'm a little thrown that nums1 has zeros at the end of it. To be honest, I would have expected those to come before 1.
It's a good point. I think it says it talks about this a little in the description. It's only the non-decreasing numbers you need to care about, but the array nums1 is going to have an array size of m plus n, and the reason for that is because we want you to do this in place. So all those elements from num2 ultimately need to fit in nums1, and that's why those zeros are there. Those zeros are just blank spots.
Got it. Okay, that makes so much sense. Thank you for explaining that. So
can you actually scroll down to the constraints for a second?
Yeah. Okay. So nums1, I see. Nums1 has to be m plus n, where n is the number of non-zero, or I guess we could have a 0 in the beginning of nums1, but m is the number of integers that we care about in nums1. And n is the length of nums2.
Yes, you're given m and n, so you're given those lengths, so there should be no confusion over when a 0 is an actual element of it versus simply a placeholder.
Got it. Okay, that's great. That's actually great that we're given m and n. That's very nice. Okay, awesome. We're given m and n. N potentially can be 0. I guess n can be as well. Interestingly, m has no upper bound, but I don't think that's super relevant for us right now. And there is sort of a combined upper bound because together they can't be more than 200. And then we have a really low lower bound and a really high upper bound. Essentially saying, hey, these are, I'm assuming these are integers. Yeah, integer arrays. And that our integers can be like quite negative or quite positive. They can get big.
Yeah.
Which I don't think dramatically impacts the problem. So we've got nums1, nums2, and they're sorted in non-decreasing order. And right, m is elements in nums1, n is elements in nums2. And our task is to merge them
Mm-hmm.
in non-decreasing order.
Yes.
And the final sort iteration not be returned by the function, but instead stored inside the array. So modify nums1 in place. And thank you for pointing out what you were saying, that they've already kind of helped us out here. I see. Okay, so they're interesting. I'm never going to be increasing the length of nums1 is what's happening.
Exactly.
So I will never increase the length of nums1. Just to very quickly look at these examples as a sanity check. That makes sense. I think I see what they're saying. So to think through this, let's say I think the actual like merging operation isn't terrible because I can just, since we know that each of these is in a non-decreasing order already, that they're sorted, I can start with nums2 and I could start with 2, say, and I can compare it to the first element in nums1.
Mhm.
And I can, if it's not, if it's not bigger than it, or I'm sorry, if it's not smaller than it, move forward, move on to the second. In this case, they match. So I can make a decision if I want to place it. I'll probably place it to the right of it, just on principle. And if for argument's sake, this was also 1 and then we get 3, then obviously the 2 would go to the left. And then I would move on to the next element in nums2 and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so this is, I think the time complexity here, if I start, if I start from the beginning of nums1 every time, it's n squared, and I may implement that just to get something working. But we can be a little smarter about it because since we know that nums2 is sorted, like once I get 2 out of the way, I'm never going to have another element in nums2 less than 2, so I can pick up where I left off. So I could leave a counter here and then do it that way, and that will give me some degree of improved performance.
Okay. Well, they're both sorted, by the way. They're both in non-decreasing order.
Right.
So you do have that guarantee, and you have the m and the n provided to you, so you know exactly the length of each. So I believe there's no reason it has to be on squared, but whatever you want to do to start, go ahead. Up to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying, and yeah, I may need to get something down to think through the time complexity, but I think like keeping that pointer in nums1 as I go.
Mhm.
So definitely should give us better than n squared performance because we don't have to start over every single time.
Okay. Breaking out of character for a second. Is that you, Adam, or does someone have background noise?
That is not me.
We have a hot mic of some kind. Maybe it's gone now. Okay. Yeah, anyways, go ahead.
Yeah.
And just letting you know, you have 8 minutes left. So
Okay. Yeah, I know I need to get some code in. So I think the approach I have makes sense. I want to iterate through nums2 and nums1 and then merge. I will say the one thing I feel a little fuzzy on is these trailing zeros. I'm going to have to get rid of them as I go. And I do admit I have to actually look up in Python how to insert an element into a list at a specific point without overwriting. So I'm
Okay.
gonna
Yeah, go ahead. You can look that up. Just letting you know those zeros there, they shouldn't be a problem. They're there to give you buffer room. So the idea is, if you insert something, you can push everything forward, and you're only going to push zeros out of the way.
Got it.
It looks like that's what you want.
Yep, and it's just a little pop-up. And the output, the sun also rises in the east. Yep, so indeed, it is not overwriting anything, which is exactly what I want. So I want a list insert. So I need two loops here. For I'm just gonna call this nums one element in nums one. Then for let's just call this n1 element. Let's just call this n1l. In fact, nums one element in nums one for nums two element in nums two. And I do just want to make sure that I am not doing anything silly here with my for loops. So I'm just going to run some print statements.
Let's see.
It looks like I have a typo there, so I'm glad I did that because that was not what I was worried about, to be honest.
Good, you ran it.
So standard out is printing out a bunch of stuff, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted.
Is that what you wanted? I would take a look at the entire output.
Let's see here. So M and
What you printed to the console. View all. Let's actually see.
so I was looking at the standard out here. Oh, I see. So nums one, the first element is one, and then we have 2, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 5, 1, 6. Thank you. There's something that I did wrong here because I keep. No, that's right. That's right. Because
Okay. Can you scroll all the way? I'm trying to help you here. Can you scroll all the way down to you? Because I believe you're looking at all those zeros as well, correct?
do you have these zeros here?
When you're printing it out, like what I'm trying to point out is that when you're iterating through it, you're comparing 1 to 2, 1 to 5, 1 to 6. That's fine. But after you compare 3 to 2, 3 to 5, 3 to 6, you're comparing 0 to 2, 0 to 5, 0 to 6. Those zeros at the end are not truly part of the list. They're just placeholders.
I see what you're saying. Right. You're right. Okay. I have to add a clause to check for 0 because I don't want to. You're absolutely right. Once
remember, 0 could be a legitimate element in the list as well, but there's something else this function gives you to let you know. Yeah. So consider all the inputs of your function.
Right. I can use the length of M. I can use the length of N. I do have to figure out how to handle the zeros correctly. I'm going to come back to that just in the interests of time because I just want to get some sort of conditional down so that if nums2 is less than or equal to nums1, I want to insert it to the left. So if to use their test cases here, if 2 is less than 1, which is not, I would want to put it to the left. So if this was like a 1 or a 0, it would go to the left here. Here, 2 is less than or equal to 2, so I want to put it there. this does raise, I have to think about for the very first element in nums1, if this was 0, for example, and I needed to insert it to the left of the first thing in nums1, then I might have to do that differently, because but let me at least get the most naive something down, so I have some code, because right now I know I don't have any code at all there. And I also need my index, to be honest, which I don't have in my for loop. And I maybe should have done this in JavaScript, because I actually have to Google how to get the index for my Python for loop.
The index. You're saying you want to know where you are?
Correct. Because I need to know where in nums1 to insert my item.
Well, keep in mind you're being provided the M and the N, and those are going to tell you the lengths of the list. So it might make more sense, instead of looping through the elements in the list in that way with for in, you might want to use a range and loop through the indexes, and then using the index, you could always grab that specific element.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I and to be honest, my Python is a little rusty here.
Yeah, just a heads up, I think we have 1 minute left. I can give you 2, but at 9:05 we're going to be done.
Okay, I'm probably not going to be able to get much more implemented here.
Okay.
So
in that case, do you want to just write some pseudocode? Do you want to explain what your plan was?
yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. My plan was to iterate through both lists. If our second element list is less than the first one, insert the item from our second list into nums1. To the left of n1, so that it's in the right spot. And the edge case that I hadn't figured out how to handle was doing this with nums2 sub0, the very first thing in the list. I don't know if there's sort of like a shift operation or something. And there might be a better solution to this, and I actually probably should have checked in with you, because I know that I'm sort of ignoring the zeros and the information we were given about, like, with M and N. And my plan roughly was to, like, then using M and N, delete all the zeros that are placeholders, and to do that, like, at the very end. And that doesn't feel quite right, to be honest, for this problem. It feels like I'm kind of going about it the wrong way, but that was the approach that I came up with.
Okay, just looking at that, the left adjacent is 2. Okay, I see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there probably is a way to push things such that you're not keeping those zeros around and you don't have to get rid of them after, but that's a legitimate approach. My main concern is something I don't see in this pseudocode is the reason why M and N are given to you is because as you add things to nums1, the length of nums1 is going to change, and you're going to have to account for that. But either way, we're at time right now, so we're just going to call it.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking to, like, count backwards, like move backwards from the end of nums1 and
Mhm.
using number n to try and get rid of those zeros, because the zeros are, I can add m and n together. And you're right, I should have laid this out, but I could do something like,
Well, we're at time, so
yeah,
we have to go.
right,
But what I'm saying is it's not just the deleting the zeros that matters, as in you need to know when you've looked at all the elements of nums1, and that's why n is being provided to you.
right. You're absolutely right. I did not include, right. And you had mentioned that earlier, that we have to have a check somewhere to make sure that we don't go past those into the zeros.
Right. Okay. Well, anyways, thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, great.
This was a good
So,
follow.
okay, we're done. Should I stop recording right now, or should we continue recording?
Um, Either way, we can discuss for a bit and leaving it on the recording if we want to post it up.
Okay. Can you continue to share your screen for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Should we do like feedback right now?
Yeah, I think some feedback. Certainly, I can give myself some feedback, but yeah, I think feedback would be great.
Yeah. So I'll give you legitimate feedback.
Hmm.
To the students, I just want to say it's kind of important to know this. Not every interview is going to be the same. Some people are going to be more lenient. Some are going to be a little harsher. I'm probably on the harsher side by my default. And so you have to, well, you can't account for that so much, but I know that I've had interviews where I said the wrong thing early on, and I just knew on their face, like, okay, I'm not passing this interview because this person doesn't like me because I asked for a hint early on. And you kind of can't really account for that. It's just to know that there's all different types of interviewers.
I thought you were a pretty helpful interviewer in a lot of ways. If anything, I realized very quickly that I was rustier than I thought I was, and that kind of shook my confidence. Plus, I was rusty
Yeah,
as
fair
well,
enough. Yeah, I mean,
look up ranges and stuff.
and I remember it was kind of very similar for me last semester when I tried to do some of these that I hadn't done it in a while, and that definitely is a thing. The main two things I would say is one, in the beginning, you spent a fair amount of time reading through the problem and reading through the examples. But what that resulted in at the very top was comments that just restated what it says in the description, but we didn't see any pseudocode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like I tried to get you to engage with this, but like interviewers actually do, at a certain point, if you didn't want to listen to me, I just let you keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You started solving the problem before you had really seen the tricky part. And then part of that is because you hadn't written any pseudocode. And as a result, you ignored M and N as inputs and didn't really see why they were necessary. And that meant that by default, like I think the main thing was that you were going to iterate through this in an n squared way, and that was not necessary. So you could have eventually discovered that, but we never got to that point. And yeah, I feel like the main thing that would have helped was really trying to work through one of those examples in pseudocode first. And then the second thing was when it came to the Python, it's okay not to know everything, but if you're going to choose a language, you should have certain like of the essential methods like top of your mind. And when you wanted to look up how do I insert or how do I access something by index,
Yeah.
and you mentioned that you were rusty in the language, what that made me think is like, well, then why didn't you choose the language you're most comfortable in? Or if this is the language you're most comfortable in, then maybe you're not, maybe you're a little rusty in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are all valid points and really accurate. And yeah, my own sort of self-assessment is I am rusty in general, like looking at this both from a programming perspective, because to be honest, I am a bit more comfortable with JavaScript, but I probably would have had to look up something to deal with like array insertion in place with JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. I kind of shortchanged like one of those steps, and that's why writing out pseudocode and then like actually running through a simple example case with your pseudocode is so important. Because if
Yeah.
I had done that, then I would have caught that issue of, hey, I need to make sure I don't blow past 1, 2, and 3 in nums1 and start counting all these zeros like they're actual values and not placeholders. And if I hadn't written out the pseudocode and actually ran through like that small bit of example data, then there's a good chance I would have realized that.
Yeah. So I think that those are all valid points, and that's kind of the reason why doing these often is kind of important, because basically two things. One, you practice the process, but two, also you get familiar with the kinds of problems and the kinds of methods the problems expect you to use. And then in that case, you'll just know things like, looking something up by index or inserting in place. And those are going to look different depending on your language, which is why, like, if you choose your language, then you stick to that language. And I know people in the chat are saying that I am blunt, and that's legitimate. But you should understand, I'm not doing this to attack Adam in any way. I'm just trying to like I've had this experience myself, and it kind of hardens you a little, that what you realize is that once you're out of school, they're very much not your friend. They're not your enemy, but they're assessing you, and they're assessing sort of like what it's going to be like to work with you. And you just like your best case scenario, like, I know it's insane to say like, be perfect, but your best case scenario with these problems is that you basically have a perfect performance, and then there's no reason they don't push you forward. Whereas it's very easy to sort of be, just because you're rusty, maybe like reveal some weakness, and then that goes in the person's mind. And when it comes to these interviews, you just have to expect that like there's someone else out there who's getting it right, and who's basically like, passing this technical part more or less perfectly, and that's a standard you could eventually reach. And if you don't, there's always someone else, and like there's always a higher levels. Like there's the reason the Google interview is kind of the standard, because if you can do 5 of these very hard problems in a row and do it well, it's like sort of universally recognized as, okay, they've reached the peak, and of course we're going to give them this job. Yeah, that's it though. Adam, are you frozen? Yeah, and just to show that I'm like equal opportunity, and that I'm not just criticizing Adam, I'm planning on setting up some Pramp interviews myself and recording them, and then the interviewer will be someone who doesn't know me and gives me, direct, blunt feedback. Usually not in real time. They have like a system for that, but that's kind of I want to demonstrate that so that we have a sense of what it's good to eventually use Pramp, because it shows you what it's like to interview with someone who doesn't know you, who has no interest in giving you anything other than direct feedback.
Hey,
yeah. Hey,
I popped out for a sec. And I one thought I want to share along the lines of what you're saying, Benjamin, but I don't want to jump in.
no, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to echo everything that you're saying, like especially like using Pramp is good in practice. And I've done a lot of interviews, and I feel like the feedback that you were giving me is pretty standard. Like you were saying, like, I mean, honestly, getting direct feedback in an interview is a good thing, because if you don't make it to the next round, that's feedback that tells you exactly what, hey, this is what I need to work on so I can do better in my next interview. Really, what would really suck is not getting any feedback. Yeah, the interview world and software engineering teams generally, I think people are like pretty direct in feedback around anything technical. And on one hand, like, yeah, I feel a little foolish that I'm rusty, but on the other hand, both because it's a good teaching moment and because it's how you want to handle yourself like an interview, like not taking this feedback personally, because it's really not. It's about like, hey, like, how was your performance on this work related task is really important. So I thought your feedback was great and pretty standard for what I've experienced in the world of tech interviews.
Okay, yeah, fair. And like I said, you'll get different interviewers. So like I know I can be a little harsh with this stuff. Um, but it's kind of good to see that like some interviews want to be your like I've had it in the same interview loop, all of them, where someone wants to be your friend. They really want to help you. Someone else, it's like you know they came in with a bad mood, and the minute you ask the wrong question, you're like, oh, I'm on their, I'm on their list. Like they don't want me. And you just know, and it kind of sucks because you're like, and I still have to go through the whole process. Whereas I know this guy's going to sink me. What can I do? But it's just that's part of the game of it. That like,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a good question too from in the chat, like how long will the interviewer let you think? Maybe like if before they see if you're off on a wrong path. And I really should have checked in with you, Benjamin, as my interviewer. And really that's like sort of why the process is like write out some pseudocode and then like walk through it with the interviewer and like say, hey, like what do you think? Because you were trying to guide me and I could sort of tell. But to be honest, I was getting a little anxious because I could tell that I was not getting closer to the solution. And that just kind of ends up, it's just the path that gets worse and worse.
yeah,
So I think taking the time to write pseudocode and walk through it with the interviewer, like you were saying, is really important. And if I was to do like a post-mortem, which I do, like when I interview, or even like when I was working after like debugging something, I would sort of do like a little self-analysis of like, all right, what did I do well? What could I do better? Like the pseudocoding, and it, and honestly, like Benjamin, if you gave me that degree of feedback in a job interview, I'd be thankful for the feedback because it's useful. Clearly, like getting more comfortable with my process of making sure I'm pseudocoding the problem and talking through it, and then I obviously also have to spend more time doing basic programming tasks with the language that I'm interviewing in with Python. Like I should have known range and lists down cold, or with JavaScript. Like, there probably were other areas where it would have hit challenges, but that covered those two things cover a whole lot of ground. And the good news there is both of those things are incredibly accomplishable. Like both of those things, we're talking about a couple hours of practice.
yeah. And I think that's an important point that like what Adam's saying is the experience, as in if you're not like you can only prepare so much for this, but the reason to prepare is that when you're on the real interview, if you're in a situation where you don't know where you're going, but you have to do it in real time, you're going to get flustered and that's going to sink you. And so the idea is to prevent getting flustered, you just practice a lot. And that gives you some muscle when it comes to, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to keep moving forward, or I'm going to remain calm. And like Adam said, it's a very difficult skill, but learning to like listen to the hints and actually stop because you want to drive forward. But they're trying to tell you, hey, if you drive forward, you're going to be going in the wrong direction. But yeah, that was, I think that was good. That was a good session.
Yep, totally. Yeah, and thank you. And honestly, like I've been doing not as much programming as I want, so I kind of enjoyed it and like got some value out of it. Yeah, this was a great session. And great questions, everyone.
Right, cool. Well, we've eaten into group projects a little bit, so people are very much free to go back to those. Let me open breakout rooms again. But otherwise, if people have questions or want to talk about this process, you can stay in here for now. I'll just open the breakout rooms.
Yep. And I will get the market review day schedule out to everyone shortly.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna pop out of Zoom, folks. But thank you all and catch you later.
All right, I'll stand for a minute if anyone desires.
Ben,
Hey,
I just wanted to let you know that I submitted my my personal project.
Yes. Okay, let me just mark you down there. Believe I have at least another person to look at, but Eric, okay. So the video is in the drive, right?
Yes.
All right, so I will go take a look.
Thank you.
Cool.
Did I
Hey,
miss
Ben,
some
will you
good-
be around today to answer questions?
Yeah, for sure. My time right now is very much about grading and following up on people. So by all means, yeah. If you want to
Okay.
schedule something, just DM me and we can figure out a time.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Did I miss some good stuff, Ben?
What was good? We did we had students do a specific problem, and then we had me be the interviewer and Adam be the interviewee. And you caught the end of it, and I was probably a little harsh. But it's probably good to see that. And my plan right now, you know about pramp.com?
Yeah.
So I have one scheduled for later today at 11. The only one I could get right now is a front end interview, but they have a few types. And my plan is to record those and obviously ask the other person if they're okay being recorded. They could go off camera if they want. But if so, then we kind of have a like example of what using pramp.com is. And I think it's good for students to see that because you'll get real feedback on that. And if we just ask students to interview each other, they might not really know how, you know?
Yeah. And is this for like the future so that we don't have to do interview days or what's that
Not
for?
so that we don't have to do interview days, but just to encourage people to use Pramp and maybe to start integrating Pramp more. Cause I know that at Pramp's free tier, you could set up like peer-to-peer things, but there's also a mode in it where it's just like interview with a friend. And then it's like just an environment and problems. And it's not very different from Lead Code, but I feel like it's probably good for like Jessie Parfus said she used Pramp the other day and that it was kind of a wake-up call because like, I mean, they kind of asked a really hard problem. They asked a dynamic programming problem, but still it's kind of like a wake-up call of like, right, like there's such a thing as like high performance on these things and there's problems I'm not even familiar with. And just like, you know, it's good to see someone outside of the program during this transition phase to go to like the real world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything I could do to support today?
I don't think you have to, as in today's mostly going to take care of itself. I have some grading to do, some people to do one-on-ones with. I do want to find out the Beyond Tech who's actually teaching that, whether it's Adam or Catherine and Rob. Did I get that name right? Am I confused?
Catherine and Rod?
It's not Rob, right? No, but Catherine and the people who run career services.
Oh no, that's Rich.
Rich, yeah, I knew I didn't have it right. So right, yeah. So I'm gonna find out who's running that, but otherwise, I feel like the next few days should run themselves. And Adam has a mock interviews pretty figured out, and we'll run those. And if he's asked you to like volunteer there, that also. And then on Thursday, that's the day that I don't quite know what we're doing. As in, what does group project presentations consist of? Should I be telling people stuff beforehand? Because I know we like want to record things like that.
So Thursday is for people to present